Hi, my name is Lisa Martin. I am the mother of a child with special needs. He has Fragile X syndrome. In many respects, he has been my teacher. He has made me be a more caring, compassionate, better human being. What we have learned together on our journey, I have realised the difficulties and challenges that parents of special needs children face are wide and varied. During my years of facilitating courses for parents and professionals, I have met some wonderful people who have shared with me their stories of great joy and sadness, who have experienced the good, the bad and the ugly of all aspects of life bringing up their special children. I am passionate about empowering parents who are dedicated in helping their children with additional needs. You're invited to my podcast. I will be talking about all things in our special world of disability and additional needs. I will be interviewing other parents of children with special needs, as well as professionals and people in the community who are offering services that help. Sometimes these podcasts might touch an emotional nerve and upset you. Other times they might fill you with joy and empower you. I don't mean to make you angry or upset, but we need to get a wider audience listening and talking about disability. Only when this happens, I believe disability won't be feared as it is today. Hello, my name's Lisa Martin. I'd like to welcome Anne to The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. Hello, Anne.
Hello.
So Anne has two daughters, and Anne also works in the world of the special world as well, helping other parents with children with additional needs and disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with you've got an older daughter who's 17, neurotypical,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got a younger daughter who's 14 who has dyspraxia and dyslexia.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
That's right, yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How does dyspraxia present itself within your younger daughter?
Well, when she was younger, particularly when she was at primary school, I noticed that she was struggling with different things. It might be practical things like getting dressed. She'd often get her buttons out of line, or maybe put her clothes on back to front. And she seemed at times quite hesitant and quite anxious about some things, about knowing what was going to happen, when it was going to happen. And also seemed a bit anxious about friendships with children at school. She was popular and she enjoyed other children, but I think she often felt as if she didn't quite fit in, or she didn't quite get what was going on around her. So that's how I first noticed that. And a primary school teacher raised some concerns about her spatial awareness. So things like how she was using a ruler to draw a margin on the page was very much in the wrong place, kind of like in the middle of the page. Wow. And her writing was often not on the lines where it should be by a certain age, etc., in terms of development. So with those things raised by the school, and myself, I'd always had some niggling doubts that something was wrong or not quite as it should be. That's how I ended up with the school getting her referred for an assessment for dyspraxia. Once I'd looked into it and researched it, I thought, it's probably this. That's right. How we kind of found out. So she was diagnosed when she was about 10.
Okay, so that's quite a late diagnosis as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So dyspraxia, what exactly is dyspraxia? You know, when you read about it and you thought, that sounds like my daughter.
Okay, to be honest, I'd never heard of dyspraxia before I entered that world and educated myself and found out about it. It's a lesser known condition. I'd say it's almost where dyslexia was maybe 10, 20 years ago, where now these days most people have heard of dyslexia. Dyspraxia manifests itself in a different kind of way. It used to be something called clumsy child syndrome. So this was a child who put their cup or glass on the edge of the table and it would fall off. Or the child who would always miss the ball playing catch, or couldn't ride a bicycle, would knock and bump into other children, objects, etc. But dyspraxia is much more than that. It's about spatial awareness, definitely, But it's about how messages come into the brain of the child and how quickly they're received, and therefore how quickly the body can respond, or how quickly the child can respond to questions in class or in general conversation. It's quite a difficult diagnosis to pin down. It's quite a subtle concept, and it's very easily missed in school, in different settings, etc. The child can be quite anxious because they always want to know what's going to happen next, because they feel as if their body doesn't quite work in alignment with how they want it to, or they fear getting something wrong, because on some days they may understand a question, know the answer. On another day, their brain can't access that answer. So on the one hand, it looks as if they maybe in school look as if they're messing about. One day they understood the answer, the next day they genuinely can't find that answer. So it's quite a subtle diagnosis, and it's fairly prevalent. I'd say in most schools, in the average classroom, there's a child with dyspraxia, whether diagnosed formally or not.
Yeah, that's really interesting because as you know, my child Iggy, he has sensory processing disorder, and dyspraxia being one of them. And you're absolutely right, because some days are better than others, aren't they? And it depends on how regulated you are, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and we can all get out the wrong side of the bed, so to speak,
We certainly
can't we?
can.
You know, and it's more prevalent in children with these additional needs.
Yeah. And I think it is a condition that can very easily go under the radar, especially at school. Especially if the child doesn't act out or play up in an obvious way. This will be the child who is struggling quietly in the classroom, who probably goes under the radar because they're not exhibiting naughty behaviour, for want of a better word. And they can often be perceived as lazy or not trying, whereas actually it takes them often twice as much effort to produce the work. Handwriting is often a very clear sign of dyspraxia, disordered handwriting, mixture of capitals and small letters, not on the line. Children with dyspraxia will often say their hand hurts when they write. That can be another clue. So there are lots of small things which, if you just look at them individually, may not send off alarm bells, but collectively often can indicate.
And earlier on you were saying to me as well that the dyspraxia and the dyslexia quite often overlap, you know, because you're saying about the writing and the mixing the capitals with a lowercase, and trying to figure out which bit's the dyspraxia and which bit's the dyslexia, and how really that doesn't really matter. It's just about what support to put in place.
That's right. Yeah. It almost doesn't matter if that comes from this side or from this side. It's actually how the child or the young person is supported to work with that and to deal with that. And produce the work. And with children with dyspraxia, you often find they're very verbally capable. So if you talk to them, they can be very eloquent. They can talk at great depth on subjects. Ask them to write that down, and there's a discrepancy between what they can produce in terms of written work and what they can convey to you verbally.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. So what other things did your younger daughter do that you thought, you know, that this doesn't look quite right?
I think with her there always has been, I think there still is, an air of innocence. She, in my experience, has never intentionally been mean to another person, and was often lost and confused when she saw people often other children being mean to her or being mean to other children in the class. She was genuinely perplexed as to why somebody would do that.
Bless her.
And feel very upset about it because it was wrong to her. She has a very strong sense of justice and doesn't like other people to be picked upon or bullied in any way, etc. And you can almost see that innocence in her. It's a real strength, but it's also a real vulnerability as well.
Yeah, definitely it is, isn't it? Because I know you were really concerned when she was going into secondary school, weren't you?
Yes, I was. I was worried about her going in secondary school in terms of how she would manage academically, but more than that, how she'd manage socially, and I was concerned whether she would be singled out for bullying. Fortunately, that's not happened, and she's more robust than I gave her credit for initially. She's a very robust person, and she has managed to make friends. And, you know, she struggles academically in some areas. Maths is very, very hard for her. That also is very common in children with dyspraxia. There's a condition called dyscalculia, which is almost, somebody explained it to me, it's almost like the dyslexia version of numbers, where children really struggle with maths and mathematical concepts. So that's hard for her. But there are other areas where she excels, like she likes drama. She's very good at drama. She enjoys literature, and history is her thing. She struggles with her working memory, but in other ways she has a very strong long-term memory. So something like history she really enjoys and shines.
So does she remember all the dates and things like that?
She can recall a lot of dates, and even sometimes things that we've done socially. She might say to me, 2 years ago on, for example, 26th of August, we went to Southend and we were on the beach. Do you remember? And I, in my old age, cannot remember. But sometimes I check my diary and she's bang on correct.
Wow. That's amazing, isn't it? So getting back to her friends and everything, and she's been really lucky that she's been accepted for her abilities and her additional needs as well, which is really good. So some of her friends, they know about her dyspraxia, don't they?
Yeah.
And then some don't, and you give her the choice to do that, don't you?
Yeah, I've always believed that's for her to make that choice. Excuse me, that the school know about the dyspraxia because I told school and I wanted them to be on board so that they could support her. And to be fair to schools, if they don't know a child's got additional needs, it's hard for them to support. So, but with her friends, I left it for her discretion. Some she's told, some haven't. And she has a friend who has dyslexia. She has another good friend who has a diagnosis of dyspraxia. She knows children with autism. She's very open-minded to different people. She knows different people, their brains work in different ways, and she's not worried by that, or she's not prejudiced about that. She sees it, somebody like Daniel Radcliffe, the actor, has dyspraxia, and she loves Harry Potter, and she was amazed when she saw that he had the same diagnosis as her. So I think we've just tried to root it in normal, everyday life.
That's great that he actually came out to say about his dyspraxia, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot more famous people or people in the limelight who are saying quite openly that they've got autism or dyspraxia or whatever it is.
There's the model Carla Devine, I think it is. She's come out saying that she has dyspraxia. The singer Florence Welsh from I think I've forgotten the group she's with, but anyway, that singer, she's come out as having dyspraxia. So yeah, it's becoming more well known, more understood, which I think is good, because then other people don't feel so isolated or so unsure of themselves and realise actually there is a lot of dyspraxia around.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, really good. So yeah, her social circle, they sound great. They sound like a great, unique bunch of individuals. Sound right up my street.
They're definitely quite quirky, quite a few of them, yep.
So how about her older sister? How does she view your younger sister?
Interestingly, she's not ever asked too many questions about it. We've been very open with her, and we told her when her younger sister got her diagnosis when she was 10, so she was about 12 and a half, then we explained to her what it was and how it might impact on her. She's never really asked a great deal. I mean, it came out that a few years ago, she did say, that I, as mum, spent more time and more focus on the younger sister, and said she felt that wasn't fair. And I reflected on that and agreed back with her that yes, that had happened. It wasn't intentional, but that was my way of trying to protect her younger sister, who I felt needed more support and more guidance than maybe her older sister. And she's accepted that. She can now understand that. And I think she's very close to her younger sister. I think she finds her very funny, very quirky, and she's quite a strong personality. So as they've got older, they've kind of equalled out almost. You know, younger sister can give as good as she gets and so on. So, but they do have a good relationship. And I think because we've been open about it, that's allowed her to be open about it.
Yeah.
And she, I think as an older girl, she's aware from having gone through primary school, secondary school, that there are different kids out there. And some do have additional needs. She's seen that in her own class and her own groups and so on. And I think she's very open-minded.
That's great.
Yeah.
But she's got lots of compassion and empathy as well.
Yeah, she has.
But one, just being your daughter, because you're like that. But I think the siblings of children with additional needs, you know, they do seem to have a lot more compassion and empathy and non-judgmental and
They still have their rows, of course.
Of course they do, yeah. Sibling rivalry.
Absolutely.
And all of that. Yeah. So that's great that they really get on. And you set up like a dyspraxia, like parents who have children with dyspraxia, like an informal group, didn't you? You wanted to offer support, didn't you?
Yes,
to the parents, because did you feel quite isolated at first when you thought, what is this?
Yeah, I did. When my younger daughter was being diagnosed, we had a really supportive occupational therapist who really helped us a lot. And then she got her diagnosis and the case was closed. And then I felt pretty much left alone with it.
Yeah.
And there's a period I think most parents go through where you have to accept that your child is not quite the child that you anticipated having, or there may be more support needed than you thought. And for me, I was lucky. My background's always been in advice and support work, so I had the experience to go off and do some research about dyspraxia and so on. And I decided that I went through a period where I had to accept my different child, and I was concerned about what might happen in the future. Would she struggle at school? Would she struggle as an adult, etc.? So part of that process, I decided I had to accept the diagnosis because it wasn't about me worrying about what I felt about it. It was actually my energy and my focus needed to be on supporting her going forward so that she had the best potential, she had the best chances. So I contacted the old OT and offered my email address and phone number if there were any other parents who were struggling, because I trusted the OT to, you know, only pass my contact details on to reasonable people. And I was put in touch with another parent, and we've been good friends for 5 years now. And she also has a daughter with dyspraxia who's actually very good friends with my daughter. And we set up an informal group of about 5 to 6 parents who meet up every few months. We go out socially, but we also support each other with information, tips, moans and groans, etc. So yeah, that kind of developed out of there, really.
That's so important. That's wonderful that you've done that, and I'm sure that you equally got as much support as what you gave out as well, didn't you?
Absolutely.
So it's a win-win situation, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think it breaks that dynamic of feeling alone with a difficulty, feeling that maybe you're the only person in this situation, or you've got to come up with all the answers and all the resources. You don't have to. If you reach out to other people, there's a lot of experience and support there.
Because that's exhausting as well, isn't it? Like doing all of that by yourself, trying to keep house, trying to be the mother, the friend, the therapist, the absolutely everything that we have to do, and all of the research and stuff. It really is tough. It's a tough few years, like you said, going through a bit of a grieving process, isn't it, when you get that diagnosis and then you're left to your own devices and good luck, goodbye.
And I think you really have to look after yourself as an individual first and foremost, because if you're not in a good place there, how can you support your child? It's essential that you look after and support yourself and get support, advice, and, you know, where possible, some socialising, some relaxation for yourself.
It is really important, isn't it?
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for doing that. That's so great. So tell me a little bit about your advocacy background before you got into the special world of being an advocate?
Okay, so I've always worked in support roles and kind of advice advocacy work, a lot of it around housing, homelessness. So that involved working and supporting people who were homeless because they have alcohol or drug problems or mental ill health, women fleeing domestic abusive situations. That really, I saw a whole range of different issues in life and different support needs that really opened my eyes and opened up my mind to how difficult life is for some people who can very easily fall through gaps and find themselves homeless or at risk of homelessness.
Yeah.
So that was a really good background work for me. And I like advocacy. I like looking at what the law says should happen, looking at reality and trying to match reality to what should be happening, etc.
Yeah.
I think there is quite a lot of injustice around in different areas of society, and I think it's good to balance that and help people get the services that they should have.
Yeah, that's really good work that you've been doing.
Thank you.
And then having your child with an additional need really got you interested in helping people within that world as well.
Yeah. I was lucky, as I say. I had a really good occupational therapist who gave me a lot of advice and support. But then case closed, and I realised I needed to go and find other sources of information and support. And I realised that was okay for me to do. I could do that. But then it occurred to me there must be so many parents who, for different reasons, aren't in a position to do that, be that through English as a second language or simply their child's needs are so high that they really don't have the space or the time or the energy to go and get support. People who just wouldn't know where to begin and are stuck in that process of, I don't know what to do, I'm really worried and scared, I don't know what to do. And I saw a job advert that offered some training that allowed me to go into the role of special educational needs advisor, or SENDIASS. And that's how I ended up working in that field. I was able to use my past work experience, but also my personal experience of a parent with a child with dyspraxia, to combine those into an advocacy role that's been really, really good.
That's fantastic. So you were saying to me earlier as well about, when you're working in this job, that lots of parents are feeling they've got concerns and they're being passed from pillar to post and stuff. And you were saying that, the parents are they know what's going on with their child and to trust in their instinct.
Yeah. I think very much. I think if I look back to myself, I always knew my little girl was a bit different. I sensed there was something different about her. And I've spoken to so many parents now who were told by other family members or friends, well-meaning, but were essentially encouraged, oh no, don't follow your hunch, or no, you're just worrying too much, or, they'll grow out of it, whatever the concern is. Whereas actually that parent was listening to their own instinct, but was unfortunately talked out of acting or going further, seeking advice or diagnosis, etc. I would say very strongly, as a parent first of all, but as a worker also, follow your hunch. If you're worried about something, you're worried for a reason. There's something there. Explore it.
Yeah, that's really good advice. So now you work in the SENDIASS team. What does SENDIASS stand for?
Okay, SENDIASS is one of those long-winded words, I'm afraid. It stands for Special Educational Needs, Disability, Information, Advice, Support Service. It was something that, up until a few years ago, it was referred to as the Parent Partnership Scheme.
Right.
Yeah. So basically, each local authority is obliged by law to fund a service which is impartial and separate, that gives advice to parents and carers of children and young people with additional needs. And we can also give advice and support directly to young people from the age 16 upwards. And that's the work I do now. That's a very important service. I'd recommend any parent who has a concern about their child or young person in terms of additional needs or disability has a look at their local authority's website, the SENDIASS service. There are staff there that you can talk to who can talk you through different benefit entitlements, for example, disability living allowance, support in school, how children should be supported in school or even nursery, in college, if they may need something called an education healthcare plan, which brings in a higher level of support for the child, a whole raft of subjects. Yeah. Exclusions, etc., which I'm sure many listeners know are on the rise. Children being off-rolled in GCSE year, etc. So there's a lot of work that we do there.
Oh, the SENDIASS team are fantastic. I've personally had a lot of support from a SENDIASS team in my local authority as well. So when you got into doing this, like you say, all your past advocacy work really set you up for all of this, really. So you had to go into training, didn't you? What training did you do to be able to continue your work in the SENDIASS team?
Okay, because the service is based on law, on the SEND Code of Practice. So there's certain legal obligations placed on local authorities, on nurseries, on schools, on colleges, etc., in terms of how they should offer education to children and young people with additional needs, and how those people should be supported because of their additional needs. So things like reasonable adjustments, they should be treated equally, they shouldn't be disadvantaged, etc. So in order to do that work, you need to do some training, which for us came under an organisation called IPSEA, IPSEA, who also, by the way, have a very, very good website available for parents for advice and resources. We have to do 3 levels of legally based training in order to understand the law and then to advocate and advise parents, in particular if they're in conflict or maybe coming into conflict with a school or a local authority around what services are available for their child.
Right, okay. Can anybody do the training with IPSEA, or do you have to be part of a SENDIASS team?
No, SENDIASS officers have to do the training because they have to be legally qualified, but parents are able to do IPSEA training if they look on the website.
Right.
They do run training courses for parents, and a lot of SENDIASS services actually have volunteers working in their team as well who are offered the IPSEA training as well, which is really good for them.
Because I bet you learned a lot, not just for your job, but for your own rights, having a child with additional need as well. Did you?
Absolutely. Yeah, my eyes were opened as to in terms of what the law actually said should happen and what often we see on a day-to-day basis happening in reality. And it made me much more aware of my rights as a parent in terms of both of my daughter's education, and it also encouraged me to become a school governor. So I'm a parent governor at a secondary school, and as the governor I have responsibility to be the special educational needs link governor. So I meet often with the SENCO, I can influence SEN policy, and it's my role to raise SEN at governor meetings to keep it on the agenda and to make sure that policies don't unintentionally discriminate against pupils with additional needs.
Wow, that's brilliant that you do that as well. So you said at this particular school, the SENCO's really on board, which is great, isn't it? Because you've met some SENCOs from other schools that you've had to deal with that aren't very on board, to put it
No, it's
politely.
putting it mildly, yes. I suppose like with all jobs, they're as good as the person doing the job, but it also depends, I think, on the school's attitude towards additional needs. Some schools are very inclusive and they're fully on board. Other schools, I'll have to be honest, I've seen where the attitude towards children with additional needs is quite shocking, and where there can be quite high exclusion rates for children with additional needs without the school, for example, looking into what support could be put in place as a preventative measure to support the additional need rather than resulting in exclusion or the child being having a managed move to another school or so on.
Yeah, I bet you've seen it all, haven't you? So this Senko, he's really on board with you going into the school and talking about dyspraxia and getting, being an advocate and spreading the word about dyspraxia, which is great.
Yeah,
isn't
very
it?
much so, yes, definitely.
Yeah. Because aren't you part of a dyspraxia support group as well? Not the one you set up, but there must be something that people with dyspraxia can go to, or their parents.
There's an organisation called the Dyspraxia Foundation that's been running for a number of years now, that has a very good website with a lot of resources, also has a helpline, and they've been campaigning and trying to spread the word for years about dyspraxia, what the symptoms are, if you like, what to do if you think your child may have dyspraxia, again, what support should be available, how you can support as a parent, as a family, and so on. So that's a really, really good resource to look at for dyspraxia.
First point of call.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd also, if parents have concerns as well, I'd have a look at the IPSEA website, IPSEA, and there's another really good website I like to use at work and personally called Contact. It used to be called Contact for the disabled child, and that website's fantastic. It's very easy to read, has a helpline, really, really helpful.
Oh, brilliant! That's great advice. Thank you. So you've worked in 2 London boroughs.
Yeah.
Doing SENDIASS as well. Have you seen a difference in each borough? Like, is one better than the other, or not?
To be honest, I see pretty much similar issues coming up in both.
Right.
Both boroughs. It's the same, really the same SEN, the same social educational needs coming up, where parents are waiting for a diagnosis, often for a very long time on a waiting list, unfortunately. Where it's hard for children to be understood at school if they have undiagnosed additional needs. Same pressure, the same need for help with claiming different benefits connected to a disabled child, like disability living allowance or carer's allowance, for example. So really, no, very similar. Exclusion issues, I'd say that, because I think the financial pressures within the system at the moment, I think, are affecting all local authorities. Austerity, funding is being cut, etc., etc., and there's a squeeze. Local authorities are squeezed. You can see their impact in school funding. They're squeezed. They're less able to offer support. There's a longer waiting list for occupational therapists or CAMS, the Child Adolescent Mental Health Service, for example. So all of these cuts and squeeze and pressure on services impacts everybody. But ultimately, the person who feels the brunt of that is the child or young person who needs more support and so on. Yeah,
it is all the cuts. It is a very broken system at the
I
moment,
agree.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that you're seeing the pressure in both boroughs, because, when you live in one borough and you've got a child with additional needs, you kind of think, well, would it be better if I moved? And sometimes it's like, what's the saying, jumping from the frying pan into the fire.
Yeah.
It's a bit like that, isn't it? Because you just don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's something that a lot of people across the UK actually are always thinking that. Is this borough the worst borough?
Yeah.
And if I moved down south, or should I move north, or wherever, am I going to be any better off?
Yeah, and I think you see those questions around. Parents often wonder about whether to move their child to a different school. Would another school be more inclusive or more supportive?
Yeah.
Or, sometimes when a school maybe changes from a local authority school to maybe an academy, there can be changes in SEN and how many children are really supported, or sometimes maybe discouraged from applying for certain schools, etc. So it's very, very difficult for parents to make an informed decision. And it does look as if some boroughs are wealthier than others. That may be true, but it doesn't always follow that the special education needs service or support is better than other less
Yeah.
less affluent areas.
It's just like a minefield out
It
there
is, yeah.
for parents with children with additional needs.
Yeah.
Because it's just an extra job that we need to crack on with of trying to do the research. And plus there's a lot of doors closing as we're trying to get into them all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
We're jumping through a lot of hoops of fire just to get our children's needs
met. And I think and going back to that fact where parents do almost pluck up their courage to raise a concern or raise a question about their child if they think their child may have some difficulty or something's been bothering them. Very often those initial inquiries can be poo-pooed and parents told, oh, no, they'll grow out of it, or maybe you're just an over-anxious parent and it'll pass, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But I always think in anything with your child or your young person, if you have those feelings, they're there for a reason. My personal advice and my professional advice would be to act on them.
Yeah.
They're there for a reason. They're telling you something that you're worried about.
And I think you're absolutely right. But I think from my own experience, I know I was passed from pillar to post. And when you're going through that grieving process as well, where you kind of come to that realisation trip that, your child does need extra support, and is there any support out there? And then you're being passed from pillar to post, and your head's in such a state, and then you kind of think, well, they're the professional. Should I believe? I should be believing this professional.
Yeah.
And it's quite often the professionals that are getting it wrong as well, isn't it? Sometimes.
Yes, definitely, definitely.
Especially when it came to Fragile X syndrome, or the professionals, they just can't know absolutely everything, can they?
No.
It's an impossibility, really.
It is, and I think, as with all jobs, some people are more committed to their job than others.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that can come through, and I think there's a lot of pressure on those different professionals. Yeah. Sometimes there's pressure on them to, almost, I wonder sometimes, almost don't diagnose too many cases, because then almost once the child's diagnosed, it's harder to ignore those problems, and that can help to get support for the child or young person.
And
so there's
that
also
costs money, doesn't
that costs
it?
money,
and everything's already tipping up right over the edge.
That's right.
And do you think that really is going on? Do you think there's a lot of professionals? Do you think that people are being told, not just the schools and the professionals, but maybe play it down a bit, because there seems to be this influx of educational healthcare plans, and it's costing a lot more money, and
I think in the years I've been doing this work, I've really noticed an increase. There's basically two levels of support. So there's something called SEN support, special education needs support, where school, college can support a child from their existing budget and from their existing staff's knowledge and expertise. And if the child or young person needs more support or a higher level of funding, that can come through applying for an education healthcare plan. And the number of those plans have definitely increased. The number of applications for them, I think, has really gone up. And I think the number of requests to local authorities asking for those assessments, many of them are rejected. But on appeal to an independent tribunal, I think at the minute nationally it's about 85% of those appeals are successful.
Wow.
So that gives you an indication of how much is said no to, whereas actually it does meet the legal threshold and should be assessed and considered. So I think there is a push up, because schools don't have enough funding at the lower level. Inevitably those needs push up to where schools, parents, young people could try and get more support through an education healthcare plan. Yeah, that's really interesting, because I didn't know that. I didn't know that without a diagnosis, if your child has, each individual child needs to have got different needs, whether they've got an additional need or not. We're all different, aren't we? But I was always told, I don't know by whom, I think maybe the schools and other professionals, that unless your child's got an educational healthcare plan, then they can't get that extra support that each individual child
needs at school.
That is,
and that's wrong, isn't it?
It is wrong. It is repeated a lot, and it's, whether that's intentional or unintentional, I don't know, but it's not correct. There is support at the two levels, and children don't need to have an education healthcare plan to get a support at school. But as we just discussed, the pressure on schools means that a lot of those needs are being pushed upwards into the education healthcare plan level.
And and you're right, that's probably why there's a lot more applying for the education healthcare
plan. I think
plan.
So, yeah. Because I think also a lot of parents are misinformed. Schools can make an application for an education healthcare plan. Parents can do so in their own right as well. They don't need the agreement of the school. They have a legal right to request an assessment themselves, and the local SENDIASS team can support parents to do that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of parents don't realise that as well.
Yeah.
That they can actually, because I think they've been put off.
Yes.
A lot by the nursery or the school or whatever. And they're just not aware that they can just apply themselves.
That's right. I think that's why I would encourage parents. SENDIASS service is an impartial service. We are funded by the local authority, but we are completely separate from and impartial. So our job is to say what the law says and what parents, young people, children have a right to request. Yeah.
That's brilliant. The SENDIASS teams all across the board are just really vital in the support that parents need.
Yeah.
And knowing that you're available is great.
I also just, I've noticed within the SENDIASS service in the 2 different teams I've worked at, but also in other teams, a lot of people who work in the service are parents themselves of children or young people with additional needs, or have some strong connection to that world as well.
Yeah. That's really interesting, because a lot of these podcasts that I've been doing, there's a lot of great stuff happening, hence the good, the bad and the ugly. The good tend to be things that are set up by parents of children with additional needs, or they're working in the special world to help and support other parents with children with additional needs.
I agree.
Because we are the professionals, really, aren't we? We understand it, we're living it, we're breathing it, so we can offer the best level of support.
No, I agree, and I always say to parents, you're the expert in your child.
Yeah.
You know your child best.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, thank you so much, Anne. Would you like some water?
I think I might need some water,
You've
please.
got a bit of a
Thank
tickle,
you.
haven't you?
Thank you.
There you go, my
Thank
dear.
you, Lisa.
So what I'd like to... thank you so much, by the way, for all of your great insight. But what I usually finish off with is what do you do to feel good in your challenging world?
Do you mean in a personal capacity? Or
Yeah, just for you to kind of, because...
kick back and relax?
Because you work in a very challenging environment, and you're having to... it must be quite difficult not to get upset at times, because you're seeing families... on the breadline, in a very difficult situation where they're being passed from political course, and then you've got your own stuff that you're contending with as well. So it's really important for self-care, isn't it?
Yeah. I think in terms of what I see at work, I think I'm quite a boundary person, so I do obviously feel and have empathy for the parents I work with. I try not to let myself get too upset. I try and use that energy to do something about the situation.
Yeah.
So to turn that around and to try and support that parent and improve the circumstances. That's how I try and channel it in that way. And for myself, I think a good sense of humour really helps. Having, relaxing socially, doing something nice, usually, involving some Merlot always helps me. A good film, a night out with friends or family. Yeah. I think you have to take care of yourself in order to do that. Yeah. But also just understanding that you're part of a far bigger movement. You're not alone as a parent or as a worker, and that there are, so many people out there trying to improve the system.
Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons why I want to get these podcasts out. My aim is for hopefully making parents of children with additional needs to not feel as isolated and to understand that there's loads of us out there and we're all doing the best that we can, and there's support out there as well.
No, and I think the more open conversation there is, the more publicity, the more people can talk freely and discuss their concerns, their worries, their hopes for the future around special educational needs, then I think the more understanding there will be in society and the more informed other people will be, and hopefully supportive and understanding. So I think it's taken the lid off, and I think parents are often in the position where they're almost closed down.
Yeah.
School tells them not to worry, it's a phase, they'll grow out of it, or their families say, oh no, they're fine. Don't be saying that there's something wrong, etc., etc. I think there can be a lot of pressure on parents, but if you feel there's something there, my advice would be explore, be open, find people you can safely talk to, find organisations you can look at to get support and advice.
It's so important,
It
isn't
is,
it?
yeah.
Because I think you're right. I think there's this from a very young, when your child's really young and you're just starting to get the concerns, right from then there's this kind of like not talking about it. Let's not talk about that. If we ignore it, then it doesn't exist.
It will go away.
Yeah, shoving things under the carpet. And this is another reason why I want to do this podcast, because let's get talking about it. And it's okay to be angry, and it's okay to feel upset, and it's okay to grieve. But you need people to talk to about it.
Absolutely.
Because you always need the fun, the humour, the feeling good in a challenging world, and how we connect together and and not stay stuck in these feelings, which is okay to feel like that. And it's okay to talk about it. Yeah,
I think it's absolutely essential. It's what got me through, and I think it's what I offer to other people. It's certainly what I get back from other people.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, Anne. We're going to
Thank you.
finish up on that.
Great,
That's
thank you.
Brilliant.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to join me today. To find out more about what I do, visit www.specialworldtraining.com. and follow us on our Facebook page, Special World Training, Instagram and LinkedIn. I believe knowledge is power and strength is in numbers. And if more people get involved in our special world, we can all make our world a better place. Join me next week for more amazing stories from the good, the bad and the ugly.